Most houses built in the last 20 years are at risk of being leakers.
The crack down that corner of the cladding.
Yeah. Shockingly, leaky homes are still being built. 89,000 homes throughout New Zealand are suspected of being leaky homes, and the estimated repair bill is in excess of $23 billion. And it's not just homes, it's public buildings, schools, hospitals and other public amenities and commercial buildings. And now we're just faced with the blame and finger pointing. No one's actually prepared to stand up and say, yes, we have played our part in these failures and let's get on and fix it. My mission is to find out what went wrong, who's responsible, and what can be done about it. This is a major disaster of epic proportions. To wipe $23 billion off the value of the New Zealand housing stock is a catastrophe in anyone's books. Hi, my name's John Gray and this is my home. This was supposed to be the perfect home for me, an inner city development, close to all of the amenities, and yet I still have nightmares about it. I was surprised to learn that my house was leaking, and it was simple detail that let it down and allowed water to penetrate. And I became very, very angry at the industry and the system that allowed this to happen. So I took my claim to the Weathertight Homes Resolution Service and I won. I then went on to set up the Homeowners and Buyers Association of New Zealand, which is representing the thousands of good New Zealanders who through no fault of their own have been trapped in this nationwide disaster. This is a story from our files at HOBANZ. A typical battle is forming around Colin and Diane's house in Howick.
It's an unattractive house, quiet. It's hard to believe you're actually living in this close to Howick.
Very elegant, very handy to our family and spacious. It was beautifully presented and beautifully kept.
It's a chilling moment when you authorise the demolition team to tear down your dream home.
It was an accident that started it. In the process of fitting a shade sail, the guys who put it up accidentally damaged one of the pillars holding up the balcony. And the guy who repaired it said, you really want to have a look in here because this timber's very wet. Plans show that those 5 pillars there were steel posts, but they turned out to be timber. Treated timber though, the only treated timber in the house, I think.
The demolition guy told me he was doing one of these a week. The first thing to try and understand is how this could have happened. I'm an airline pilot by profession, and this is a model I borrowed from the aviation industry where it's used to understand systemic failure. Imagine each barrier to failure is a slice of Swiss cheese. There's always a hole in a barrier somewhere, and we rely on there being enough barriers so the holes don't line up. But if the holes are big enough or the barriers are flimsy enough, the system fails. We place a blind reliance and trust in the aviation and maritime industries, and it's well deserved because of the professionalism and the tight regulations that surround their activities. However, the same cannot be said for the building industry because clearly Parliament has dumbed down the industry and actually taken steps to deregulate it back in the 90s. So clearly, at least part of the blame lies at Parliament steps. The 1990s was the age of the free market, so the government took a light-handed approach to regulating the building industry with wide-ranging reforms aimed at making it easier to build. Among other things, they abolished apprenticeship schemes and changed the building code to allow for creative designs in houses.
That's what the people were looking for, and that's certainly what the national government of the day gave the people, and that was exemplified in the Building Act.
John Green has over 35 years' experience in this industry, and as a Weathertight Homes adjudicator, he's seen the fallout.
We had an industry that was largely underskilled and under-resourced. Companies just simply weren't taking on apprentices, and there wasn't the same on-site training that had been a function of the industry for years before that. And we were seeing a number of key tasks, particularly cladding-related tasks, done by the lowest skilled.
The new taste for Mediterranean-style homes called for novel designs using materials and systems that were untried on the New Zealand landscape. Christchurch building professional Mike Antisich has got strong opinions on leaky home issues, and he's got the pedigree to back it up. What have we got here, Mike?
It's a multi-unit development. Some of these are tilted.
He's been a builder, a building surveyor, and was at one time an assessor for the Weathertight Homes Resolution Service. Some cracks in the wall here.
That's typical. So the water just comes down, gets straight up underneath there.
Was the flashing on before the
Yep.
plaster went on?
Yep. None on the top, of course. Why would you? This has got a big ugly slope, so all the water collects in this corner here.
So there's just a hole here through which moisture will flow.
Exactly. There's no threshold protection between the deck and the floor inside. We should have a drop, in my view, at least 100 millimetres, 4 inches.
Wow. So this is the under deck area.
This is all a result of the leaking deck. Every one of these buckets is placed there to pick up drips of water, and sometimes they have to replace these at regular intervals during the day. Water's entering every one of these windows, and the sadness of it is this is all new joinery. This was only put in 2006.
Are leaky homes still being built?
Absolutely. Every day.
Well, you just cast your eye across the landscape here, and even from here, you know, can you see those sorts of houses that will be presenting with problems?
Well, wouldn't you look at it yourself and just say that's about 80 to 90% of them?
I'm asking you.
Well, they are.
Yeah.
They are. They've all got those same design risks, the same materials, the same means of construction.
What is the whole Canterbury region going to be suffering in terms of the leaky home problem?
Well, I see the biggest problem is that they're going to run out of time. It might take 15 years down here, it might take 20, but it's happening. There's no question about that. There's just no question.
As part of the government's changes in the 90s, councils were given free rein to interpret the new building rules.
When this all started and we needed to find out who we were going to try and recover our money from, we went to the council to get the records, all the council records, which we got on a disc. And then when you actually look at them, the plans are there. There's a whole bunch of paperwork, but there's nothing in it.
Here is the application for building consent that was on the file. We have the name of the owner, but no other contact details. But the most important part is where the key personnel is supposed to be entered. The designer, the builder, the drain layer, the plumber, gas fitter, electrician, and the certifiers. Manukau City Council holds all building records for the area, so they should be able to fill in all of the gaps.
This is the paperwork.
There's nothing out on a separate database?
No, this is everything that we've got.
Oh, okay.
There was a final inspection done by ABC certifiers. Did you have a copy of that as well?
No. Is that a list of inspections?
Yes, it is, but I'm surprised that you haven't got that.
Yeah, well, definitely those inspection records aren't there. Why would a council let that inadequate paperwork be processed?
I suspect that the councils had no reason to conclude that a greater level of record keeping was required. The need to be able to track who actually did the work has really only become apparent as a result of these leaky building cases, where so many people that were involved in the building work are no longer there.
As new and innovative house plans demanded cost-effective solutions, there was a relaxing of rules around building materials. Many new products introduced to the New Zealand market were actually untried in New Zealand conditions, and despite even having brands appraisals, actually failed in service. Part of that cause of failure was the complicated instructions that weren't necessarily followed by builders. And ultimately, those products just end up on the demolition heap. I've come to talk to Peter Burkhout, the CEO of Brands, the Building Research Association of New Zealand. Do you think Brands got it wrong?
I don't think specifically Brands got it wrong, but I think we were part of an industry that wasn't thinking systemically about how you use products. And so by the end of the 90s, we were just getting far too innovative, far too out there for the New Zealand climate, for the New Zealand building industry.
And to compound the problems, we switched to untreated timber, which might have been fine, except it relied on buildings being totally weathertight, which they weren't. This is Phil O'Sullivan, the guy who first blew the whistle on leaky homes in the late 90s. He found untreated framing timber, approved and introduced earlier that decade, rotting in houses all over Auckland.
We'll never know probably the true cost.
Phil says the introduction of untreated timber was pushed hard by one company.
Carter Holt saw the opportunity, managed through a great deal of determination, and influence and using the weakness in the standards process to get the standard changed so that a small amount of untreated timber could be used, which, once they got it through, it flooded the market.
What was their motivation?
Money, basically.
So you're saying Carter Holt were one of the prime movers behind
They were
this?
the prime mover, yeah.
They were the prime
They
mover.
were, there's no one else, yeah. Yeah, other people followed them, but they were the prime mover, yeah.
Via an Official Information Act request, we obtained documents dating back to the early 90s, and particularly letters and emails exchanged between the Building Industry Authority, the BIA, and Carter Holt Harvey. Clearly, Carter Holt Harvey were lobbying for a change to the timber standards to enable them to introduce kiln-dried untreated timber into the New Zealand market. And yet, the BIA were facing severe opposition from the industry and from the territorial authorities. It was identified in a letter that the architect for the BIA sent to Carter Holt Harvey. Builders being the conservative lot they are, I suspect I will have more irate or disbelieving phone calls, so any ammunition would be appreciated. And yet the BIA still went ahead and approved untreated timber. We approached the BIA's architect at the time. While she refused a formal interview, she did have this to say.
I was doing a job, it was my responsibility as the technical advisor to look into it. All the indications were that it was going to work. I wasn't the only, I mean, it's not my responsibility, it's the authority's responsibility, so you should be talking to them.
The authority no longer exists. It was dissolved in 2004 and absorbed by the Department of Building and Housing. We've made a number of attempts to get an interview with the CEO of the Department of Building and Housing, because clearly there are a number of questions that need to be put to her. She has refused to be interviewed by me on this subject. But those documents were going in both directions, and Guy Kavanagh was Carter Holt Harvey's marketing engineer at the time. His is a name that appears often on the Carter's site.
Hello.
Hello, Guy. There's no one left at Carter's who had anything to do with campaigning for the acceptance of untreated timber. Guy's now retired but remembers the time. Was it profit-driven?
Yeah, well, I guess it was a competitive market, and, you know, if something was going to cost a fortune, the building industry wasn't going to buy it.
In hindsight, was it a mistake now to use or allow the use of untreated timber?
In hindsight, there were a whole lot of mistakes, including that one.
Even though it's a long time ago, I think Carter Holt Harvey deserves a chance to comment. So I'm calling Rob Davies, the present CEO.
Unfortunately, Rob's still in his meeting. He's not due out probably for another hour or so, but I can certainly pass your message on.
We really wanted to give Carter Holt Harvey an opportunity to put their side of the story in defence of some of those accusations that have been made.
No, I will definitely make sure the message gets through to him.
All right, that's great. Thank you very much.
Thanks, John.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Rob has never called us back. Well, we'll wait his call. And our emails go unheeded.
Prior to the use of untreated kiln-dried timber, basically all timber that was used on site was wet and treated wet and arrived on site wet and heavy and took months to dry out, and there were inherent problems, peeking and popping of line ends, etc. And so it was concluded that untreated kiln-dried timber would provide a much better result.
Is there anything inherently wrong with untreated timber?
Not in an ideal world, but the trouble is we don't live or operate or build in an ideal world. And certainly if moisture could be kept 18% or less, then it would be fine. In furniture, but not in houses.
Perhaps the most obvious place where things have the potential to go wrong is during construction. Not only were the new supposedly weathertight claddings being used, but claddings were fixed directly onto untreated timber with no cavity to allow water to escape. When you came to be buying the house, what sort of due diligence did you do to protect yourselves?
We asked some specific questions. We asked, was it built with a cavity system? Yes. Was it built with treated timber? Yes. Have you ever had any problems with it? An emphatic and rather annoyed no, never.
None of those statements were true?
None.
So you were totally misled at that point?
The cavity is partly true because the bottom story does have a cavity, the top doesn't.
The person that Colin and Diane have a strong claim against is the builder-developer. His method is typical of many cases we see. Build a house, live in it for a while, sell it to build another one, and so on. And that makes him a bit difficult to track down. Hello, I'm just sorry to disturb you. We were just looking for Mr. David Chapman at this address, and obviously he doesn't live here anymore. Thank you. Bye. The gate's closed. We've got another address in another new suburb.
Hello?
Hi, is that Ms. Chapman?
Yes?
Hi, it's John Gray speaking. I'm just wondering if your husband's at home today.
Just one moment, please.
Keep off this property, please.
Sorry?
Keep off this property, please.
Okay. We just wanted to talk to you about the leaky homes issues, Mr. Chapman.
All right, just goodbye.
You don't want to talk to us?
No intention of talking to you.
In relation to the Harris house?
In anything.
Why?
Goodbye.
But you're responsible for developing that property, which has been demolished. The Weathertight Homes Tribunal found that in the 7 years prior to building Diane and Colin's home, the Chapmans had purchased 3 other sections, built a home on them and sold them. David Chapman was also the person in control of the consent, design, construction and approval, and ultimately the marketing process of the home. He therefore owed a duty of care to Colin and Diane, and was found to have breached that. Although Mr. Chapman didn't want to talk to us, he has since been ordered by the tribunal to pay the full $750,000 that was claimed. We have hundreds of similar cases where builder developers say they were building a house for themselves to live in. But if you do that over and over again, you're a developer and you owe a duty of care to the next owner. For many people considering buying or building a new home, this would seem a sensible place to start.